Hello, AP World History. How's it going tonight? Tonight we are going to be discussing how to LEQ with the theme, the revolutions. So the notes are down in the description for you. I also put them in the comments so that you will have them. That's what I will be using tonight as we review how to write an LEQ. Go ahead and grab those. Hey guys, welcome in. I see we got Koala and Oswaldo. Koala, I'm sorry, I never remember your real name, but Koala is cool. You know, that's like your undercover incognito name, your YouTube name. Hey Melanie, welcome in. Good to see you guys. So I dropped the notes that I'm going to be using tonight in the description, as well as the comments. You can access them in either place to be able to follow along. All right, let's delve into this LEQ and get you guys studied up so that you're all ready to write it. First, we're going to look at the rubric real quick. So you can access the rubric right there on the notes. I put it in there for you. You'll also have access to this when you write your LEQ tomorrow or Thursday? Yeah, tomorrow or Thursday. It's been a long week. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is context. Contextualization, super important. That's what kind of puts your topic into context. It tells how you got to a certain point, all right? So we've been talking a lot about revolutions last week and this week, and we said Enlightenment is a big part of that context. So if you're writing about Enlightenment, what kind of things would you talk about? Well, talk about some things that you can link to revolutions, right? So, for example, John Locke and the fact that he said that we should have a social contract with our government. You can explain that, and you can explain how the founding fathers of America used that, or how they used it in the Declaration of the Rights of Man. You have to be able to tie it in with the revolution. So anything that you can do to tie it in will be good. Also, don't forget, it's important to talk about what's going on in the whole world, right? So most of the Enlightenment is happening in Europe. How does it spread to America? How does it spread to Haiti and all these other places where revolutions are happening? Okay. Hey, T, welcome in. We just got started. You can access the notes in the description below, and you can also access them all the way at the top of the conversation. I put it in there as well. All right, then you're going to have your thesis. In your thesis, you want to make sure that you have what you're going to be writing about, and we'll talk about that more here in just a minute. Then you have 3 body paragraphs. So each part of your thesis that you're arguing will be a body paragraph. Within those body paragraphs, you want to have examples, specific examples. So those would be like vocab words, okay, or people, places, things that happen, documents, things that are going to prove and support your argument. And then you have to support your argument with history, basically. Hey, Vardine and Perry, welcome in. I have the notes for you in the description below, as well as in the comment section, so you can grab them in either place. We just got started. We're looking over the rubric. We're going to talk about the rubric more in depth, though, as we go along. So if you're just tuning in, that's fine. Okay, and then you also get a point for historical reasoning using comparison, causation, change in continuity language. All right, so real quick little reminder. You have comparison, causation, and change in continuity. Those are the 3 historical thinking skills. So as you're thinking about what the topic could be, think about what we've talked about, and then look at how do they compare? What are the causes and effects? We did those in our notes, so you already have those. What are some changes and continuities that happen with revolutions? Okay, that can kind of be like a pre-study, because obviously, I mean, we don't know what the prompt is going to be about, but you can kind of prepare yourself a little bit by just reviewing that information. All right, and then complex understanding, you get that for a well-written essay, pretty much. All right, so let's look at this practice one. LEQ. Hey, NTube. Welcome in. Does the LEQ? I'm not sure what your question is. You'll have to rephrase that for me. All right. Analyze the extent of political or social change as a result of one of the following revolutions. All right. So this is important. You need to remember that if it asks you the extent, you have to address that. So we're going to highlight that. We also are going to highlight political or social change. That's the skill that we're doing in this practice one. So it's going to be all changes. It can be either political or social. And it's a result of one of these revolutions. NTube says, I mean, the LEQ on Thursday, are there multiple choice questions? No, it's just the LEQ, NTube. Just the LEQ. Hey, Sahir. Hey, Oscar. Welcome in. I got to take off this sweatshirt. The heater was just on, and now I'm hot. All right. So we're just getting started with this practice one. And you have 4 choices. They have the dates on here. Now, remember, with change, you're talking about what happens before the change and after the change. You're also going to want to stay within this realm of years. It has to happen within that realm of years. And if you're talking about continuity, it would also have to happen. And you know what? I think I changed, speaking of change, put in or continuity. Because when I was writing this, I think that got taken out somehow. So we're going to talk about change or continuity. Yeah, and that's a load off your mind, right? Just the LEQ. That's all you got to worry about. All right, so for this practice one, we can do political or social, change or continuity. The change and continuity both need to happen within those years, okay? So let's say we do the American. That's the one I'm going to choose because most everybody is pretty familiar with what happens as a result of that. So what I would suggest is to make a little chart like this, and you can label it change or continuity. Continuity, if I can spell it right. There we go. Or similarities and differences, or cause and effect, whatever it's asking you to do. What are some changes that we can think of that happen as a result of the American Revolution? Well, a pretty dramatic one, pretty drastic one is the change in government, right? I mean, we become a new nation. So you could say America goes from a colony or from colonies to a nation. And I would label this change just so that you remember that that's what it is. And then you're going to put your evidence. Remember, if it's a change, you have to talk about before and after. So what was it before? What was it after? You can say something about how they were the 13 colonies ruled by a king. Yes, Fardine. So the continuity would have to be within that as well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So 13 colonies ruled by a king. You could talk about heavy taxation as being the why they wanted to break away. You could talk about the Revolutionary War. And then what happens after? New nation. In this planning part, you're just getting down some thoughts. You don't have to make it very detailed because you're going to write that details later in your essay, but to get down some thoughts is a good idea. All right, and then as I was kind of like thinking about this, I couldn't think of any more changes. Can you guys think of any more changes? Oh, this is also a political change, so we're going to label it that so that you don't forget to add that in because that was a part of the question up here. So I couldn't think of any other changes, but I did think of some continuities because remember, your continuities are going to be within this time frame. So what stayed the same within that chunk of time? One that I came up with was the continuity of lack of women's rights. Now, for continuity, since it stays the same, you don't need before and after, but your evidence could talk about how the revolution didn't really give them any more rights. despite the fact that they fought in the revolution, right? You could talk about how they fought in the revolution, like what role they played in the revolution. Okay, so Fardine, Louisiana Purchase, are you saying that would be a social change or a political change? Which one would that be? Or continuity? Gigi says continuity is self-government, political autonomy. Okay, that could work. But if you're going to talk about America going from colonies to a nation, that's your change. So you don't want to like double dip with more government stuff because that would be too similar. Now, if you do a different change, then that's fine. You could totally do that one. A political change. Okay. Yeah, you could probably make that argument. You'd have to talk about how it relates to politics. But you could probably definitely make that argument. Anybody think of any others? Now, keep in mind, this says change or continuity, so you don't have to do both, but for the complexity point, it says you have to do both. So I would suggest, even if it says or and not and, most of the time it'll say and, but even if it says or, I would do one of each at least, and then add one more in. The other one that I did for my pre-planning was the existence of slavery. I cannot spell tonight. There we go. Oh, I guess it's all right. All right. Existence of slavery as a continuity. Social structures, racism as a continuity. That could work too, Perry. Louisiana Purchase happened in 1803. Oh, that's true. Good call there, Oswaldo. Yeah, so Fardine, that would be out of the time frame because we only go until 1800. So here, the amount of power people had in society changed a little. Which people? Be specific in that, right? Because it would just be mostly white men, right? Yeah, no worries, Fardine. Now, Fardine, you could also use the Louisiana Purchase as context, like post-context if you wanted to, because remember, context can be before, during, or after. I think it's easier to do before and like what's going on during versus doing it after, but you can do it in any way that you want. So you could talk about that as post-context to the revolution. Did they have a continuity in the lack of distinct social classes? In America, I wasn't like as distinct as like Latin America and the Haitian Revolution, but there definitely were social classes. So it was mostly the wealthy and the upper class who were running things. So I wouldn't say that there was a lack of social classes. It just wasn't as blatant as it was in the other revolutions. Now, if you choose to do a different one, then you could do a continuity of social classes, except in the Haitian Revolution, remember, they're pretty much going to kick out all the white people. And everyone becomes free. They're still going to have some social class, though, because they'll have poor people and middle class and upper class, but it's not as distinct. Latin American, it's kind of iffy in most of those places too. Some of the more extreme social classes kind of break down, but there's still going to be some social classes there. So that one would be tough to argue. All right, and then over here I put that they enslaved people didn't get any rights from the revolution. That will come much later. Now, let's say that this date was like out to 1900, then these continuities, well, this one would, the lack of women's rights because women's don't get the right to vote until the 1920s, but this one wouldn't. So this one would become a change, and we talk about the abolition of slavery. Do you see how that works? when you're doing change in continuity, you really want to pay attention to that date because it might be a change or it might be continuity depending on the date that they give you. All right, so context, we talked about the Enlightenment, and then make sure that you tie that into revolution somehow. So what are some ways that you can do that? Take a quick minute, drop some ideas in the chat, and we'll discuss that. What are some ways that you could tie that into the revolution? Think about the documents we've looked at. Think about the Enlightenment philosophers that we've talked about. Yeah, social contracts. So John Locke and his social contract. Explain what a social contract is. Remember, it's an agreement between the people and the government that the people give up a little bit of their freedom in order to have security and safety. And then tie that into how that works with the revolution. It's a general idea that influenced the revolution. Sure. Political ideas like popular sovereignty. That would be good as well. And then explain what popular sovereignty is. Remember, pretend like the reader has no historical reference at all. So you need to make sure and explain it. Now, why is the Enlightenment even happening? Well, there's this thought that's starting to switch from the old way of the divine right of kings and religion being the dominant feature of everything to more scientific and more questioning the church. Why does that happen? You could talk about Protestant Reformation. So it depends on how far you want to go back. You could really get quite a bit of examples in this context. Hey, Non, welcome in. Oh, T, got it. Divine right of kings challenged. Yes, that's very good. I would definitely put that in there. That's important. Oscar says life, liberty, and protection of property. Turns out Thomas Jefferson changes it to pursuit of happiness. Yeah, that's a good example of how Thomas Jefferson was very influenced by reading the Enlightenment thinkers. New ideas like majority rights, the drive from religious to scientific change, separation of church and state, separation of powers, all of which are in our country, right? All in our government. That all comes from the Enlightenment. So great. You could also talk about some of the other Enlightenment thinkers by name, just depending on how much evidence you want to have in there. You should probably have like 2 or 3 different thoughts about how these connect to revolution, or how the Enlightenment connects to revolution, and then that good transition sentence to go into your thesis. Now, let's say that we were writing this one. Don't forget about this extent language that we have to have. So this is a pretty dramatic change, right? America going from colony to nation, independent. Now they're going to be an inspiration for other revolutions. The lack of women's rights, that's pretty much everywhere right now during this time frame. Existence of slavery in some places. So these are a little bit less dramatic, less powerful, whereas this one's really strong, right? So I would probably start with that one, and I would say like one drastic change that occurs because of the American Revolution was that America went from colonies to a free nation. Despite this change, there were the more minor continuities of lack of women's rights and existence of slavery, and the continuation of the existence of slavery. Something like that. So whatever you have in your planning, these 3 things need to go into your thesis. Then you're going to have one body paragraph about this one body paragraph about this one, and one body paragraph about this one. Now, a lot of the LEQs that I read just didn't have enough meat in the paragraphs. Like you didn't have enough specifics. So make sure in the paragraphs, once you go into those paragraphs, that you're really saying some specifics. With this change, I've got a lot that I can talk about. I can talk about how the 13 colonies are ruled by the king, and there was the Boston Massacre and the Intolerable Acts and all these taxes that were heavy on the colonists, and that they were upset because they didn't want No taxation without representation, right? And then go into the Revolutionary War and go into a new nation. I can get a really good paragraph out of that. So make sure that you are giving details, how it happens, why it happens, vocab words. Historic text, yeah. So talk about the history behind it. Separation of powers, I think, yes, I think that was Montesquieu. Yep. I think it was Montesquieu. Rousseau, I think, was the one that was church and state, maybe. Double check, though, but I'm pretty sure that was Montesquieu. You can write those all. Good vibes. That's right. You can write those all, Fardine. That's right. Just write them all. And then you're going to go into your second paragraph. Lack of women's rights is a continuity. And then talk about how revolution really didn't give them any more rights, even though they did play a role. Well, what did they do in the revolution? They were nurses. They were spies. Yes, they were spies. So they risked their life in an attempt to try to help with the revolution. You can talk about how Abigail Adams told John Adams, remember the ladies. We talked about that. Remember when he was getting ready to go to write the Declaration of Independence, and she said, remember the ladies. Don't forget about us. Like, we want to be involved in this freedom too. Did they involve the ladies? No, but at least, you know, that gives you some more evidence to talk about. And then the existence of slavery as a continuity. You can talk about the Atlantic slave trade, why Africans were brought over in the first place. You can give details about the plantation system, and you can talk about how Africans were involved in the Revolutionary War. They actually fought in the Revolutionary War, some of them to earn their freedom if they lived through it. But for the most part, even after the Revolutionary War, then there still will be slavery. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about those paragraphs? The biggest thing that I have seen is just not enough detail. So that's where studying comes in. You need to sit down with your notes tonight. If you take this tomorrow, you need to sit down with your notes tonight and your reading questions and really like familiarize yourself with that information. You're going to be timed on this essay. You only have 45 minutes to write it and 10 minutes to plan it. So make sure that you familiarize yourself with the information and you know where it's at. So after you get your prompt, you can use some of your notes. That's fine. But make sure that your notes are done. Make sure you've done those reading questions. Make sure that you have all the notes done from what we've done in the week and that you understand that stuff, okay? That's really important, that you know where to find it. Oscar says, you want us to fill out this? Well, it doesn't matter, Oscar. I'm not going to take a grade on it. So if you don't want to fill it out, it's fine. If you want to just, you know, have it as a reference, totally fine. I just wanted you to have something tangible. I know we've been doing, in my class, we've been planning these essays similar to this on like a little chart or something. You can do it however you want, but I think it's a good idea to have some kind of like pre-plan so that you know what needs to go in your thesis. If you don't have time to write the evidence down, if you just have that in your brain, that's fine. But make sure that you have your 3 topics so you at least know what your thesis is going to be. And then once you get that part written, you're done, basically. There's no conclusion paragraph to this. If you want to, you can restate your thesis in a little bit different order. That way, if you don't get it in the first paragraph, you can get it in that second paragraph. And then the last point is using words that go with your historical skill. And I believe I gave this to you a while ago, but I wanted to put it in here just to kind of refresh your memory a little bit. And what I did is I went to the thesaurus and looked up change words, words that are synonyms for change, words that are related to change, words that are related to continuity. We got similarity words, difference word, effect word, cause words, all the way down. So for every historical skill, I put some words in here. You get a point for using these types of words to show whichever historical skill you're being tested on. So that's important too. That's an easy point to get. It's just words, right? So you want to make sure that you put those words in there. Don't use the same one over and over. Like, don't use this is similar to over and over and over. Go down here and look up some other words that you can use. In addition to, this is equal to, in the same way, all right? Difference, on the contrary, differentiate, you could probably put that one in there. There was another, oh, in contrast. I forgot about in contrast. You could put that on there. Any other ones that you can think of, you can absolutely put them in there, all right? This is just a little helpful thing to kind of get your brain thinking about words that you could use with that historical skill. You want to throw in 3 or 4 to 5 of those words to show that, hey, I'm using the words that go with this historical skill. Thank you, Joshua. That's so sweet of you. I appreciate it. I really enjoy teaching AP World, and I love doing this YouTube channel. So you guys make it a lot of fun, and you're welcome anytime. We love to have you. We love playing Jeopardy around here, and we'll be doing all kinds of stuff in the near future to study for the test, because you know what? May's coming up. It's coming up fast. Gigi says, so I can argue the extent of both continuity and changes on an LEQ. If that's what the prompts ask you to, yes, then that's what you have to do, right? Now, this one says or, so that means that you could do all changes or all continuities. But the thing is, if you're going for this complex understanding point, you have to do both change and continuity. So I would just get in the habit of, if it asks for similarities and differences, do at least one similarity, one difference, and then your third one can be whatever you want. If it asks for continuity and change, do one of each, and then the third one can be whatever you want, okay? That's a good habit to get into. And then here's the other thing. It doesn't say that you have to write 3 total, but it's a good idea to write 3 total, because then you've got an extra one that's kind of a buffer, all right, just in case you don't get the other 2 correct. Now, let's say that you were going to do change and continuity with the French Revolution. Remember, it can be political or social. So you could talk about the change of their government, how they got rid of the monarch for a while, right? So you got to be careful about these dates. And you could talk about Napoleon coming in. He would be a change. You could talk about, what else? Social classes, the lower class, or the bourgeoisie getting a little bit more power. All those things could be involved. With Haitian Revolution, this one was the first successful slave revolt, right? So that was a big change. It went from being dominated by white plantation owners, the Grand Blancs, to free people of color and slaves running things. That's a big change. Socially and politically, you could argue for both of those. You could talk about the fact that their trade would change, because we discussed how the rest of the world didn't want to trade with them for a while because of the fact that they were freed slaves and they were racist against them. They didn't want to have any part of that. Let's see. I'm trying to think of another one for change or continuity with Haiti. Having a hard time coming up with one. Let me know if you think of another one. But those are 2 that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head. The Latin American ones, you could talk about the change with the social classes and the no more monarch, like they were free of that and independent. So that could be political. They have their own constitutions. Okay. Gigi says, how would a thesis look with using both? So Gigi, with both, you would say something along the lines of, what did I say? I should have written it down. Due to the American Revolution, America goes through the drastic change of from colonies to becoming a free nation. Despite this change, there were continuities as well in the fact that, I'd say, because you got to do the extent. So you would say there were like minor continuities in the fact of the lack of women's rights and the existence of slavery continued through the years 1783 to 1800, something like that. Your thesis can be 2 sentences. It doesn't have to be one. If you want to make it one, though, you could, and you could just shorten it a little bit. But make sure that you're addressing the extent part. That's a part that people often miss, or students often miss. Most of the time, they'll say something like, America went through the change of the colonies to the free nation, but they continued to have lack of rights for women and the existence of slavery. That's all true, but it doesn't address to what extent this happened, right? Which one is the one that's most drastic? Which ones are the ones that are a little bit minor? That's what you want to make sure and address. All right, so I am going to let you go if you don't have any other questions, because I want you to spend some time really familiarizing yourself with your notes in preparation for getting ready to write an LEQ tomorrow or Thursday. If you've not done the reading questions yet, make sure and hop over to that video. It's the Let's Read Together Revolutions, and you can get those done and get some more information. That'll help you with some detailed information so that you can really wow me on this essay. Remember, you will not have time to look stuff up much because it's very fast. That 45 minutes goes in a blink of an eye. So the more information that you have now, the better. And your 3 historical thinking skills: change and continuity, similarities and differences, and cause and effect. So you know it's going to be one of those. So make sure and familiarize yourself as you're looking at all these revolutions. How do they compare? What are the causes and effects? You have those in your notes. And what are similarities and differences? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. If nobody has any questions, then I am going to let you guys go and have a wonderful evening. Study, 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 study. The more you know these notes and this information, the easier it will be to write your LEQ. All right, I'm looking forward to getting some awesome LEQs. May I get a copy of my, oh, you mean the notes that I just wrote? These ones? I suppose, Nan, I suppose. Let me grab the link here. You know, only because it's been a long day, and I understand that it's kind of hard to flip back and forth between screens. So sure, I'll give you a copy. There you go. Fardine says, similarities and differences, changes and continuities are the same. No. Similarities and differences would be usually you're asked about 2 different things, okay? So let's say I ask you the similarities and differences between the Latin American revolutions and the Haitian revolutions. You'd have to find what's similar about those revolutions and what's different about those revolutions, okay? Change and continuity, you're usually only asked about one topic. So let's say on that one, I just asked you about Latin American revolutions. What are the changes that happened because of the revolution? What are the continuities that happened because of the revolution? That's the difference. And then cause and effect, of course, is what causes an event and what are the effects from the event. Does that make sense? All right, you're welcome, Nan. You're welcome, Gigi. All the rest of you, you are welcome as well. Thank you so much for joining in tonight. It was awesome, fun having you. I'm going to let you go so you can go and study. Get this information in your head, and I will see you next time. Have a good night.